Welcome to this explainer. Okay, to really grasp the text we're looking at today, I need you to do something for me. Imagine an ancient world where the absolute highest form of religious devotion wasn't, a prayer, a song, or some charitable act. Instead, it required the horrifying destruction of human life. It's a pretty chilling thought, right? But to truly understand the profound impact of this text, we have to start right there in that dark reality.
The sources we're exploring establish this terrifying reality of the ancient Near East. Basically, worship back then was deeply transactional. People believed that gods were capricious, and during times of severe crisis, these deities actually demanded blood, even child sacrifice, just to maintain cosmic order or secure some kind of divine favor. It was a brutal world where appeasing the gods literally meant dealing in death.
Okay, let's dive into this. First up, we'll cover the ancient sacrificial economy. Then we'll look at redefining holiness, the protest against Molech, the theology of blood, and finally, confronting the modern Molechs. This is going to be a fascinating intellectual journey from ancient history to some pretty profound modern applications.
Section 1. The Ancient Sacrificial Economy, the Transactional Gods of the Ancient Near East. In Canaanite, Phoenician, and Moabite cultures, human sacrifice was actually viewed as a desperate but highly pragmatic transaction. It was seen as the ultimate way to appease capricious deities during intense times of crisis, like war or famine.
Our sources impartially contrast two totally different worldviews here. On one side, we have cultic exclusivity. Basically, these were death-centered cults of deities like Molech, Baal, and Shemosh that operated on fear and the literal destruction of life. But on the other side, Leviticus introduces this radical, life-affirming counter-narrative introduced by the Hebrew god Yahweh. It's called ethical vitality, the idea that true devotion is absolutely inseparable from ethical conduct and social justice. It was a complete game changer.
Section 2. Redefining the nature of holiness, from cultic exclusivity to ethical vitality. Here, we're zooming in on chapters 17 through 26 of the Book of Leviticus, famously known as the Holiness Code. Our sources present this specific text as the inciting incident for a massive moral revolution.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the text redefines a single word, because it kind of changes everything. In surrounding cultures, holiness, or kedusha, was a dangerous ritual separation or just a proximity to power. But Leviticus completely shifts it from a fear-based ritual state into ethical vitality. It becomes all about the active imitation of God's moral character.
It's absolutely crucial to point out that Leviticus completely democratized holiness. In the ancient Near East, sacred authority was strictly for kings and priests. But here, holiness becomes a collective vocation for the entire nation. It insists that every act of worship must affirm life, and it establishes a theology of communal accountability. This means the community's overall sanctity was now actually endangered by a single individual's moral failure. Suddenly, ethics became a shared national responsibility. We're all in this together.
Section 3. The Protest Against Molech, Safeguarding the Sanctity of Life. The absolute central pillar of this new moral grammar was the explicit, uncompromising prohibition of child sacrifice to the deity Molech. The text in Leviticus 18:21 explicitly commands, "You shall not give any of your children to offer them to Molech and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." Our sources note that characterizing the offering of one's seed to Molech as a profanation of God's name is huge. It's essentially equating it to theological treason. To worship a God who demands the destruction of his own image-bearers, that is the ultimate betrayal.
And this brilliantly illustrates the scholarly analysis on this topic, which views this law as a radical theological protest. It wasn't just some minor rule change. No way. It was a total protest against any religious system that exploits human life as a pragmatic exchange. It loudly declares that true worship upholds life, rather than extinguishing it.
Now, scholars actually debate whether Molech was a specific Canaanite god or just a term for a votive offering, an MLK offering. But regardless of the exact definition, Leviticus treats the practice as the absolute ultimate abomination. Why? Because the Molech cult perfectly represents any idolatrous system that subordinates the sanctity of human life to the pursuit of power and security.
Section 4. The theology of blood, the mechanics of the spirit. This brings us to the climax of this ancient paradigm shift, where we impartially look at what the sources describe as the highly specific mechanics of the spiritual realm.
So let's break down how this actually works. First, Leviticus 17 establishes blood as the legal tender of covenants. It's literally the currency used to seal agreements in the spirit realm. Second is atonement via symbolic substitution. So, instead of the pagan demand for human destruction, the system allows for merciful substitution. Animal life exchanged for human life symbolically. And finally, step 3 is the perpetual fire on the altar.
Leviticus commands that the fire on the altar shall never go out. This is a massive contrast to the destructive, all-consuming fires of Molech. The Levitical fire represents sustained spiritual life, not destructive appeasement. Modern interpretations actually view this as a call to daily diligence, specifically in prayer and study. This sustained devotion is exactly what produces the spiritual authority needed to overcome dark influences.
Section 5. Confronting the modern Molechs. Let's move to and see how this builds into the modern day, bringing this ancient legal code right into the 21st century.
It is so easy to look back at ancient history and feel, well, morally superior. But I want to ask you, have we truly abandoned the altars of Molech? Take a second to actively reflect on whether modern society still sacrifices human life, maybe not literally in a fire, but systematically on the altars of security, progress, or profit. Have the altars just changed shape?
Our sources list some amazing scholarly and literary parallels here. The ancient cult of Molech has actually become a really powerful metaphor for modern systemic oppression. We see sacrificial economics consuming the vulnerable. We see it in literature, too. Allen Ginsberg's poem How uses Molech to symbolize the destructive forces of American capitalism. Even Karl Marx used Molech to describe the modern city as a destructive force. Any dehumanizing ideology that demands the sacrifice of human well-being for a perceived greater good, that is a modern Molech.
So the core takeaway of this explainer is this. Leviticus is absolutely not some archaic legal code. It is a prophetic, timeless call to resist systemic injustice. The Holiness Code is an enduring framework that demands the protection of the vulnerable and relentlessly safeguards the sacred worth of human existence against any system that tries to commodify it.
I'm going to leave you with this provocative final thought from our sources. True worship of God is inseparable from the protection of humanity, for to honor the Creator is to preserve His image in every human being. What dehumanizing ideologies must we actively resist today to protect human dignity? Thank you so much for joining me on this explanator. Keep asking the big questions, and I'll see you next time.